Hello, this is Math Dog here, and we're going to look at a grade 7 topic on basic addition, subtraction of positive and negative integers. This video may not be shared or copied without the written consent of the creator, that is me, the Math Dog. So let's begin. So first of all, what's an integer? The integers are the positive and negative whole numbers. So your whole numbers are the counting numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 1,000, a million, billion, infinity, plus 0. So the integers are the positive whole numbers, so like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., 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 etc. And the negatives of those, the opposite of 1 is -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, etc., 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 all the way out to negative infinity, and this would go to positive infinity. So they go forever in the positive and negative numbers, but they aren't every number. They are, again, the positive and negative whole numbers. So we're not talking about fractions like 1.5 here. Fractions are called rational numbers. We're only dealing with integers here right now in this recording. Okay, next, some things to keep in mind. So when we're moving to the left or west, that is going to be a negative movement. When we go to the right or east, that's going to be a positive movement. Left or west, negative. Right or east is positive. You can think of a negative sign as meaning take the opposite of what follows it. So if I have a negative followed by a positive, this means take the opposite of the positive. I can put that in parentheses. You don't have to, but you can. So the negative of a positive is going to be a negative because this is take the opposite of a positive, which must be a negative. The negative of a negative, this means take the opposite of this negative. Well, the opposite of a negative is a positive. That's always going to be true. So if I have 3 minus plus 3, this is the negative. This is taking the opposite of a positive, which is a negative. So I can replace this with a negative, and this is 3 minus 3, which is 0. Here I have the opposite of a negative, which is a positive. 2 negatives make a positive, so I can replace that with a plus. 3 plus 3 makes 6. Next, negatives and positives cancel each other out when adding. So this is a different way of looking at it. So here I'm representing -3 with 3 negative ones and 2 with 2 positive ones. So for each negative 1 and a positive 1, they cancel each other out to make 0. So here's -1 cancels out with a positive 1, so I'm left with -1. All negatives give you more negatives when adding. So if I have -7 plus -2, here I have -7. Here I have -2. Well, I have a total of 9 negatives here. So when you have all negatives, you get more negatives when adding. Just like all positives give you more positives when adding. So if I have 6 positives here and 3 positives here, that gives me a total of 9 positives. So let's look at some examples now. So -6 minus 2. On a number line, I start at -6, and this is west. And by the way, this is the same as -6 plus -2. Okay, so subtraction is the same as adding the opposite of a number. You can think of it either way. I actually often just leave it as subtraction, but you can change it to this. So on a number line, again, I'm starting at -6, and then I'm going west 2. So that puts me at -8. Using this method, which isn't very efficient, but it's easy, I think, to see what's going on. You have 6 negatives here. You have 2 more negatives here, and you have more negatives than you started with, so you have 8 negatives. Okay. Then let's look at just this way without using the number line. Although notice on the okay, we have all negatives here. So again, we could write this as -6 plus -2. When you have all negatives and you're adding, subtracting, you put them together. So -6 plus -2 gives you -8. Again, all negatives make more negatives, just like all positives make more positives. So now let's look at this example, 3 minus -7. Okay, so this, again, remember, I could put parentheses here if I want to, and often you see it this way. This means take the opposite of -7. Well, the opposite of -7 is 7. So you could put a plus sign there, and this becomes 3 plus 7, which is 10. On the number line, you start at 3, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You end up at 10. Okay, so now using the little tick mark model, this is 3 positives, and you're taking the opposite of all these negatives. So because this is, again, 3 minus -7, so you're taking the opposite of -7. So each of these positives, each of these negatives here become positives. So 3 plus 7 gives you 10. And finally, again, without using these other methods, these other models, just doing it, 3 double -7, that's take the opposite of negative as a positive, that becomes 3 plus 7, which is 10. Okay, next example. So again, double negative, take the opposite of a negative, becomes positive. So we have the problem -7 plus 3. So on number line, I start at -7, and that's here. Now I'm going 3 right, I'm going east 3, so I end up at -4. Okay, and then in this model here, I have -7, and that's going to be, here's 3 negatives, but I'm taking the opposite of those 3 negatives. So now I have -7 here, 3 here. So notice the positive ones cancel out the negative ones. So I'm left with 4 negatives right here. That's not a very efficient way of adding, but maybe it helps you see what's going on. Positives and negatives cancel each other out when you're adding. So this is the way you want to do this in the end, though. So this is -7. That's going to be plus 3. So now you have, let's go back to our number line here. Okay, well, actually, let's look at it this way. So let's have a little number line here. So here's 0. I have -7 here. I have 3 here. Notice that -7 is further from 0 than 3, so the -7 dominates this question. Okay, the -7 dominates. So when you have opposite signs, after you've simplified things, you subtract. So I take 7 minus 3, which is 4. But since I have more negatives than positives, my answer has to be negative 4. So that is how you do these types of problems. So if I have like negative 8 plus 2, I do take 8 minus 2, which is 6, but negative 8 is further from 0 on the number line than 2, so my answer has to be negative 6. Okay, to finish out, let's make a summary of the rules for adding and subtracting, for adding positive and negative numbers. I should say subtracting here also. When you're adding all positives, you will get more positives, this is what you've been doing since elementary school. 5 plus 2 would be 7. 3 plus 9 is 12. All positives and more positives make more positives yet. So when you're adding all negatives, you get more negatives. So negative 3 minus 4, which could be written as negative 3 plus negative 4. 3 negatives and 4 negatives make more negatives, make 7 negatives. Negative 8 plus negative 2. You could also write that as negative 8 minus 2, either way, but you have negatives adding more negatives, you get more negatives yet. So that's negative 10. So now finally, when you're adding one number that is negative with one number that is positive, A, subtract the two numbers, and B, the number that is furthest from 0 determines the sign of your answer. So negative 13 plus 6, off to the side here, I'm going to go 13 minus 6, which is 7. Okay, but negative 13 is further from 0 than 6, so my final answer must be negative 7. Negative 1 plus 7, well, off to the side here, I'll take 7 minus 1. If you have opposite signs, you subtract. Well, that's 6. On the number lines, positive 7 is further from 0 than negative 1, so my answer must be positive 6. And by the way, we don't usually show that, but positive 5 could be written as positive 5, but we don't usually do that. 10 could be written as positive 10, etc. So now the next question, first thing is, let's change this double negative here to a positive. So we have negative 4 plus 5. Well, this off to the side, that's 5 minus 4. I have 5 is further from 0 than negative 4, so my answer, well, this is 1, but my final answer has to be positive 1 because 5 is further from 0 than negative 1. Okay? So my final answer is 1. The next one, 15 minus 30, if you like, you could write it as plus negative 30. So over here, I'm going to take 30 minus 15, which is 15. But I have more negatives than positives. Negative 30 is further from 0 than 15, so my final answer must be negative 15. And finally, I have negative 8 minus 10. Well, let's change that to a positive. So this is just like 10 minus 8 over here, which is 2. Since 10 is further from 0 than negative 8, my final answer must be positive 2. And this concludes the video.